Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I hope you're doing incredibly well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And isn't it an exciting story? I love stories like this that are like sitcoms, and every night you get a little bit more into the story, and it's all very, very exciting. And this story is no exception to that rule. And we are all wondering at part 3, what is going on with this awful young man called Tyson, who has unfortunately come into Chelsea's life and is a not very pleasant young boy. Has he been changed and transformed by going to this military school? I very much doubt it. And let's get started with tonight's story. How Eric wished that dreadful woman, Rachel Carson, with her deranged, precocious brat for a kid, had not rocked up that day to upset the contented apple cart of their lives. Everything had been so blissfully peaceful, so tranquilly harmonious, until Tyson had come along, like an ugly pylon being erected in a serene area and becoming a hideous eyesore or a blight on the landscape. The kid was certainly not right in the head, and everyone who met him distanced themselves from him, almost as if they sensed he could not be trusted at all, and was bad news. Even the horses were unsettled when he was around, so Eric had kept him away from them. Eric had tried to give the young man some industrious jobs, mucking stables, polishing leather tack, but he'd storm off and say, "I don't want to do that. It's boring. Why are you making me do horrible, horrible stuff? This is not fun. Why doesn't Rick have any hunting rifles? I'd like to kill some of the deer in the woodgrove. Now that would be fun. Killing things must be so much fun. Have you killed anything, Eric?" he asked, his eyes lighting up like a Christmas tree. "It's not really my sort of thing," said Eric, "but I've been on a hunt a couple of times with friends of mine. I've killed a couple of stag." "You did?" asked Tyson excitedly. "Yes, I did. Nothing too big to shout about, though." "Cool! Did the animal suffer?" Eric was horrified to see that Tyson's eyes were glimmering with hope in them, suggesting that he hoped that the animal had indeed suffered. Eric's stomach recoiled in disgust. "No, it would not be nice, Tyson. It would be horrible to do that to an animal. It would be incredibly cruel. Hunting is not about being unkind to animals. Far from it, in fact. You can ask any hunter yourself. They might enjoy taking down a deer or something, but they never ever want an animal to suffer. And if they do cause that to happen inadvertently, they'll be very distressed about it, and immediately try to locate the animal, to end its suffering, to put it out of its misery as quickly as they can." "Why doesn't Rick have any hunting rifles on his property?" asked Tyson indignantly. Eric did not tell him that his father did indeed have a hunting rifle, but had locked it away for safekeeping from his own son. Eric was grievously concerned about Tyson's behaviour, and the way he was so passionate about killing. He talked about it tirelessly. It gave Eric an uneasy feeling at the pit of his stomach. Much like Chelsea, Eric nursed secret worries and doubts about this child, that one day he might harm one of the family horses, or do something atrociously bad to a member of the family. But he tried not to meditate over such unsavoury thoughts. The family had done everything possible to get help for Tyson, but their cries for help had fallen on deaf ears. And whenever Tyson went to see a therapist, he'd turn the hot tap of charm on, and Chelsea believed he made the experts think he was not as problematic as the family actually claimed he was. Since the Saxons had sent Tyson on a boys' camp for 6 weeks, the metamorphosis in his personality had been astounding on his return. Could the family dare to hope that this new Tyson was here to stay? Everyone was warming up to him. He had become approachable, hard-working, and even friendly, and he had told Chelsea that she looked very nice that morning, an unlikely compliment that had never ever crossed the threshold of the young boy's lips until now. If Tyson continued along this path, being so nice, it would be easy for Chelsea to love him like a son. If Tyson carried on being so amenable, Then she'd rarely let her guard down and go to bed without needing to lock her bedroom door up. She had been told by the psychologist that Tyson suffered from conduct disorder and had psychopathic tendencies that would never go away. Could they have misdiagnosed him by any chance? Because the boy that left for camp was not the same boy that had returned to their farm. It was almost as if she'd rubbed Aladdin's lamp and wished for Tyson to have a brand new heart. It was the best thing that they'd ever done, sending him off to camp. She had read the testimonials from mothers saying things like, "Before I sent my son off to camp, he was an absolute nightmare to live with. His bedroom looked like a bomb had hit it. He was always tirelessly fighting with us, telling us he wished we were all dead, and telling us how awful we were as parents. But when he returned from camp, he became polite, tidy, helpful, respectful, and even kind. Let me tell you, the military know what they're doing in shaping our children into becoming better human beings." Other mothers had put down similar appraising comments, but maybe their kids were just normal rebellious children, whereas Tyson had been diagnosed with a very real mental condition, where he had no emotional empathy for anyone or anything. Could Tyson have been misdiagnosed by the psychologist? Or was that just wishful thinking on Chelsea's part? Even her father had saliently warned her that a leopard does not change its spots, and not to place too much expectations on the camp. "I'm sorry, Chelsea, but the camp is for only 6 weeks, and that child is big, big trouble," he had said. "I don't believe he will ever change, but you can give it a shot if you like, and hope for the best. But in my experience, miracles are very rare." "I think you're being unnecessarily hard on the boy, Dad. Don't you think that Tyson deserves a chance?" "I hope for your sake I am wrong about this, Chelsea," her father had said. "But I'm afraid I'd put money on the fact that that boy has not changed at all, if I was a betting man. And I was always pretty astute when I bet on the horses back in my day." "Well, I hope you're wrong, Dad," Chelsea had said gingerly. "I really, really do." "I'm so proud of you, Tyson," she told the young boy. "Ever since you've come back from the boys' camp for troubled young men, you're a different boy, aren't you? I'm very, very proud of you. Very proud. You've been so helpful around the farm, so polite and so kind towards your stepsister Ashley. I really appreciate the efforts you're making, Tyson, to get along with the family. It's important that we all have a good time together." For the first time in a long time, Chelsea smiled contentedly to herself as she watched Tyson take little Ashley's hand. She watched them ferreting around in the barn, bringing out their dusty bicycles, and then there they were, cycling together into the grove as if they were besties. It didn't get better than that, did it? Maybe things were going to change around the farm for the better, and the storm cloud of trepidation that had hung around their lives like a suffocating noose around the neck had finally abated, and the stress of the last 12 months faded away like the dark blue dye in a pair of denim jeans. Ashley appeared to be giggling, and there seemed a genuine warm smile on Tyson's face. He did seem such a different boy, and even Eric had said as much. Little did she know that sometimes a wolf can wear sheep's clothing, and that her daughter Ashley could potentially be in very serious danger. But for the first time in a long time, she genuinely felt her daughter was safe, until she saw Tyson returning on his bicycle, without her daughter Ashley. "Where is my daughter?" thought Chelsea, peering out of the kitchen window, sensing something was horribly wrong. She rushed out of the kitchen door, running towards Tyson, waving a wooden spoon in her hand, sweat pouring down her flustered face. "Where is my daughter, Tyson?" she cried out. "What have you done to her?" Tyson looked at her nonchalantly. "I think the horrible hairy man in the woods took her. He tried to hurt me too. I don't know where she's gone, but I suspect she's dead. The hairy man is very horrible." Chelsea shook Tyson really hard. "What do you mean, hairy man took her? What hairy man? What are you talking about, Tyson? And why didn't you stop him? And what do you mean dead? How can you say such an awful thing? You don't even seem to care. You're so cold-blooded, Tyson, you really are." "I told you she's gone," said Tyson. "You'll probably never ever see her again. She has gone." And with that a wicked smile developed on his face, and Chelsea thought she was going to be violently sick. She lunged towards Tyson, feeling furiously angry, slapping him across the cheek. "What did you do that for?" said the boy, looking aggrieved. Chelsea did not respond. She ran towards the grove, her heart thundering violently in her chest. She was terrified of what she would find. She wondered privately if Tyson had done something dreadful to her daughter, and the hairy man was just a convenient excuse to get him out of trouble. What if her daughter was dead? "Please, God, no! Please, God, no!" she thought as she ran towards the grove. Eric's account. I have been working at the Saxon farmhouse since I was a teenager. The family has always paid me exceedingly generously for my services on their farm. But the Saxons are not just employers to me. They're like family, and Chelsea like an older sister. I grew up with my grandmother in town, after my mother abandoned me to embrace a career as an actress in Hollywood. But as far as I know, she's still waiting tables there, which is what actresses tend to do when they hope for that quintessential big break that seemingly never comes their way. My mother has never been in touch with me or my grandmother again. I don't know whether she's hugely embarrassed because she never made it in Hollywood, or whether she's simply not interested in being in contact with her own family. I do know that she's alive because very recently I saw her on a background scene as an extra in a movie. As far as my father was concerned, I have no idea who he is, as my mother never revealed who he was to my grandmother. Some people would expect me to be traumatized by my mother's abandonment of me, but I have never seen it like that. She was an ambitious woman driven by a passion for her acting, and I guess I just got in her way. Some people are not cut out to be mothers, and my mother never wanted to become one and made no secret of this fact, which is why she gladly handed me over to the charge of my grandparents. It's sad she's never been in touch, but that's sometimes the way the cookie crumbles, and I accept that. I admire her in many ways for doing the right thing by me, and realizing that motherhood was just not for her. There's nothing worse than being raised by parents that resent your intrusion in their lives. I was incredibly lucky because my grandparents loved the bones of me, so I grew up in a wholesome, very loving family home. Regretfully, my pop passed away from a stroke when I was 13 years old, so it's been pretty much me and my grandmother ever since, and we had always been very close, so I saw her as the maternal figure in my life. When I was about 14 years old or so, I began looking for odd jobs to earn a little pocket money on the side, and my grandmother actively encouraged this entrepreneurial spirit within me. I remember there was one card up on the post office wall that got my undivided attention, after I'd skimmed through dozens of others, where employers were asking to hire people to work for them in all manner of jobs, from being a groom to a caretaker, a dog walker, and you name it. Some cards were, of course, of people offering their services as a handyman, a painter or gardener. This one card seemed to literally be calling my name. It was asking for an all-round handyman that was good with horses, and it won over my heart. I knew that this was the job for me. The idea of working with horses pleased me greatly. I will openly confess to you that at the time I had absolutely no experience with horses whatsoever. But I remember thinking, what the heck? Everybody has to start somewhere, don't they? I fancied working with horses as some kind of a groomsman. For some reason the idea appealed to me, although I had absolutely no understanding why. But that did not deter me from organising an interview with 19-year-old Rick Saxon. I went to visit the Saxon farmhouse on the back of my bicycle, happily cycling down some of those sequestered backcountry roads, fringed by trees, as it's a heavily wooded part of the state. I remember the way that Rick Saxon first looked at me when I arrived on the scene. He looked incredibly disappointed. At the time he was living at the farmhouse with his father. The old man was sitting on the porch on an Adirondack chair, smoking a tobacco pipe, staring out wistfully at the prepossessing viridescent countryside, blowing out clouds of aromatic smoke. I noticed he had Rick's sparkling hazel eyes, and when he saw me he studied me curiously, but there was a friendly twinkle in his eyes that made me warm to him at once. I had no idea what he was thinking, but this older gentleman put me at ease, while Rick, on the other hand, was so much more intense, pedantic and astute. He was focusing on finding the best man for the job, and I had this horrible gut feeling that I was not what he was looking for, so my heart sunk like a heavy stone being plunged into a body of water, but I was not ready to give up without a fight. I was invited to sit on an upholstered dining-room chair, one of 8 around the stone and wood wrought-iron dinner table, where Rick and his father lightly ate their barbecue burgers on a Sunday afternoon. It was a very cosy, well-appointed wrap-around porch, which had its own built-in pizza oven and a state-of-the-art barbecue grill. Rick was making notes as he interviewed me, and claimed he was seeing 8 other people who were eager for the job. Whether this was true or not, I never knew. But I did know what he had written on the paper. Too young and inexperienced, not suitable. I couldn't be sure he'd written that, but it was a good guess.
I think the first question I need to ask you, Eric, is how old are you?
He asked me, looking at me through narrowing eyes. I'm 14, I said gingerly, sitting up erect and puffing out my shoulders and chest, trying to make myself appear significantly taller and larger than I actually was, which really was laughable, as I was a lanky lad at the time. But I could make myself appear older and wiser. Maybe Rick would then take me as a serious contender for this job. But my feeble efforts were a little lame. Rick almost looked at me pitifully.
I'm sorry, Eric. You are far too young. 14 years old is far too young for this job. You seem like a very nice lad, but I'm looking for someone who's had more experience than you. Have you ever worked with horses before?
I knew if I told Rick the truth that I'd never worked with horses a day in my life, I'd never even get a chance to work with horses, so I lied, which isn't exactly a good thing to do. And I hadn't been taught or raised to conduct myself in such a way. But I wanted this job so badly. Yes, sir, I have, sir, I said brazenly. I'm very good with horses, sir. I hastened to say I was good with animals, but with horses that wasn't true. I figured that I was a quick learner, and looking after horses would be a doddle for me. My 14-year-old brain did not doubt I could accomplish anything that life actually threw at me. When we're older, we so often are guilty of doubting our abilities and ourselves. But at the age of 14, I figured nothing could stand in my way. The world was my oyster. Please give me a chance, sir. You won't regret it. I won't even charge you for the first week of my employment. I'll do everything for free. And if I'm good enough, then you can hire me. And if I'm not good enough, I'll accept my lot. But don't discriminate against me, sir, just because of my age. I'm a fast learner, really I am. And I believe I'm better than all those people you have on your list there. At this, the corners of Rick's mouth almost twitched with amusement. He was taken aback by my confidence, but he almost said apologetically,
I'm very sorry, young man. I'm sure you're a fast learner. I appreciate your enthusiasm. Thank you very much for responding to the advert I pinned up on the post office wall. In truth, I'm really looking for someone a little older than you are, who has experience in handling horses. It's not personal. As you can see for yourself, there's a lot to do around this farm. All kinds of jobs beyond just looking after the horses, like fixing a broken fence, clearing the paths in the grove of leaves. You can see my father here is not as young as he used to be, so he needs help. Rick's father interjected with a glimmer of frustration in his eyes. What my son is trying to tell you, Eric, is I'm an old man. It is true. I'm 80 years old, said Rick's father, blowing out yet more smoke from his pipe. But I can still pretty much do anything around the farm that I did when I was younger. But my son seems to think that because I'm slower than I used to be, that I need extra help around the farm. But I'm not completely redundant, you know. I cook a mean stew, and it takes me longer to get everything done, like mucking out the stables. But there's still life in these old bones yet. I'm not quite ready for the knacker's yard yet, let me tell you. Dad, don't be like that, said Rick, giving his father a frown. You said it yourself. You're 80 years old. You're allowed to slow down. And you are slower these days, so you do need help. Don't be too proud to admit it, Dad. I work in town. I need someone to manage this place while I'm away. I'm not sure at 14 years old that Eric here is capable of doing this work that needs doing around here.
He paused for a brief moment, as if another thought had suddenly occurred to him.
What about your schoolwork, Eric? I'm assuming you're at school studying, are you not? How could you possibly take on a full-time job like this at the farm if you're studying?
Yes, I'm studying, but the work is easy. I'm homeschooled by my grandmother, you see. I'm pretty clever, always getting A's. I can do all my work when I get back home after hours, so to speak. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I want this job, sir, really, really badly. I promise you I'm a hard worker, and I want to help my grandmother out. She's been so good to me, sir. My pops recently died. I'm the man around the house, and I think my wages would contribute greatly to helping my grandmother out. She's given me so much. I'd like to return the favour.
And that is very nice of you indeed. You're a very thoughtful young man. But I'm sorry, son. If you were older, I would give you a chance. Ha ha! My son here talks as if he's old like me, Eric, said the old man, laughing. The truth is, he's probably only 5 years older than you are, Eric. Rick frowned. Dad, maybe at your age 5 years wasn't a big deal, but it is significant in this case. If Eric was 19 like I am, he would be more than a contender for this job. But I'm sorry, it won't work out. Besides, Eric, if you return home to your studies, I'm in no doubt you will be absolutely exhausted. I don't think you can take on a full-time job at the farm and commit yourself to your studies as well. Something's clearly got to give.
Sir, you couldn't be more wrong about that. I'm hard-working. I have tons of energy. Nothing is going to give. Ask my grandmother if you don't believe me. I don't ever get tired. Please give me a chance, sir. I promise you won't regret your decision. I practically begged him. It was Rick's old man who came to my rescue and began to fight my corner for me, and this helpful intervention I did not expect. But with Rick's father on side, could I dare to hope that this job could potentially be mine? My heart began to do jumping jacks in my chest, and it was all I could do not to jump on the table with excited anticipation. I could practically smell this job coming my way like a juicy steak on the grill, so close to being served up to me with a portion of fries that I was eager to get my teeth into. To say that I was drooling for this job, like my grandmother drools over Toblerone chocolate from Switzerland, is an understatement to say the very least.
Son, he said to Rick, why are you being so unreasonable? You heard the boy. He's eager to work hard and to learn, and that's good enough for me. He will work for us for the first week free, he said so himself. So if you're not satisfied, you don't have to hire him. That's a very good deal, don't you think? Doesn't everybody deserve a fair shot, regardless of their age? Rick frowned. Dad, this young man is only 14. So what? Said Rick's father. When I was 14, I was doing a man's job around this farm. Very well indeed, thank you very much for your information. Give this boy a chance, Rick. He reminds me of myself when I was his age. And if he's like I was, you found yourself a trooper.
Rick sighed, shaking his head vigorously, as if he'd accepted defeat.
He looked from me to his father and then said, "Very well, I'll give you a week's trial, and if I'm not satisfied, I'm sorry, Eric, but you will have to go. Do you understand that?"
"That's fair, sir. That's all I could ever ask for. I understand. And I truly appreciate you giving me a chance. It means the world to me, sir."
Rick slapped me on the back, as if he was twice my age, and said, "Well, I hope I won't regret it, boy."
"You won't regret it," I said, with a cheeky grin on my face that was so wide I looked like a Cheshire cat. My grandmother was amazed that I'd accepted a full-time job at the Saxon farmhouse.
"But, dear, what about your school studies?" she said, looking at me through crinkled eyes, as she moved the wool around her knitting needles with a masterful efficiency. She was making me another one of her awesome fisherman's sweaters that I loved so much, and many of the men in town ordered them from her, as they were so incredibly good. Better than anything you could buy from the store to lock in the warmth.
"You know, Granny, I can do my studies after work. I'm hard-working. I've got a ton of energy. Besides, my schoolwork is so easy."
She sighed. "Still, dear, aren't you taking on far too much for a boy your age? I thought you wanted to get yourself a part-time job. Aren't you being overly ambitious? I admire that, of course I do. But you know absolutely nothing about horses."
I grinned at her broadly. "But I'll learn. That's the point, Granny. I'll learn."
She shook her head and said, "Where did I find you, Eric? You've got your mother's steely determination. I'll give you that. You certainly know what you want. And I admire that, Eric. I really do. But I hope you haven't bitten off more than you can chew. Dealing with a temperamental horse is no laughing matter. Believe me, I know."
"Granny, I'm going to be brilliant with horses. I feel it in my guts. I know it's the job for me."
"You know what, Eric?" said my grandmother, giving me an amused look. "I think you might just be right about that. I can almost see you with horses in my head. Maybe it is meant to be. Maybe it's serendipitous. Who knows? Time will tell."
Ostensibly, when I first started working at the Saxon farm, I was only equipped with my ambitious resolve to steer me over choppy waters and navigate my way seamlessly over trouble, which, believe me, in the beginning was no walk in the park. I had absolutely no experience and was a complete novice in every regard. Luckily, Rick was working in town and was not around to see me make some catastrophic mistakes that would have likely got me sacked on the very spot, and affirmed to him that his hunch was absolutely right from the very beginning, that I had no experience for this job. I was clumsy and cack-handed with some of these jobs around the farm. The old man, who asked me to call him Ray, quickly figured I'd never worked with horses before, and gave me all the tips I needed to become skilled at my job, never letting his son ever find out that I'd never worked with horses a day in my life, which was good of him. That seemed to make Ray laugh all the more, as he visualized his son's mortified reaction. He hooted with laughter, clutching his stomach so tightly. He was getting cramps from laughing so much.
"Oh, my God," he said. "If Rick were to see the way you put the saddle on the horse, he'd be doing cartwheels and giving birth to kittens." That seemed to make Ray laugh even more, as he visualized his son's mortified reaction at my lousy attempts to saddle a horse. "Don't you worry, my son. Your naughty little secret is very safe with me. I will teach you all the ropes around here, and Rick will believe you were born for this job. He'll think hiring you was the very best thing the Saxon family ever did. And believe me, it will be the best thing we ever did."
"Thanks, sir. Thanks for not telling Rick about some of my big bumbles."
Rick's father patted me on the back. "Do you know, Eric, mistakes are a gift of God. No man ever accomplished anything worthwhile in life without failing first. Every setback is an opportunity to improve and to get better. Without failure, how can you ever improve?
Rick's father taught me everything from how to ride, how to take great care of the horses, and so much more. He was such a good man and believed in my ability to do the job. And very soon even Rick had to admit I had my uses, although he did so rather begrudgingly. I think a very small part of him hoped that I would fail exponentially, so he could say,
"I told you, Dad, that this young boy was not suitable for the job."
Instead, his father Ray was the one who was able to say,
"I told you, Rick, that you should have given Eric a chance. And was I right or was I right?"
To which his son said,
"Well, he still hasn't proved himself yet to me, Dad."
Years later, after Rick married the pregnant Chelsea and moved her into the farmhouse, I suddenly felt like I'd become part of a loving family, and Chelsea was like a big sister to me. I never looked back, and even Chelsea's daughter Ashley, when she was older, was calling me Uncle Eric, which made me feel very special. When she was christened, Chelsea had asked me to be Ashley's godfather, so I guess you could say I was an uncle to her in a manner of speaking. I would spend lackadaisical weekends with the Saxon family, and my grandmother, of course, who was often invited to join us for family barbecues and movie nights. From the moment I worked at the Saxon farmhouse from the age of 14 years old, I experienced many idiosyncratic events on the farm that made no sense to me whatsoever. They were outlandish, so much so I couldn't explain them, but I kept these things to myself. I remember on one occasion when I was clearing up one of the trails in the wood grove, uprooting saplings from under trees that were stealing space and light, as well as hindering the growth of more mature trees. I was removing dead shrubbery on this particular occasion, but had the profound sense that I was being watched. I would not go so far as to say it creeped me out, but it was certainly very unsettling. I absolutely unequivocally knew that something was there, but I saw nothing at all. I had felt a presence in the grove, of something substantial in size, that demanded respect. I could feel an imposing energy, but I saw nothing, so it frustrated me greatly. I searched the grove, looking behind trees, but nothing was ever there, and it left me scratching my head, thinking, what the hell? Let's just say the feeling of being watched by a sizable presence had soon become an increasingly common occurrence, and after a while I got so used to the feeling, like you would get used to the sound of heavy traffic once you move close to the highway. One morning in those early days when I first started working for the Saxons and was determined to keep my job, I rocked up to work late, after Rick had left for his job in town. I'm not sure what he did at the time, but I gleaned he was not cut out for country life, although he thoroughly enjoyed its rich bounty and riding his horse Plover. I think he preferred to be stuck in a miserable little office, tackling mathematical equations. I learnt later he was working for an accounting firm. On the occasion I'd accidentally overslept and was so scared I was going to lose the job, because I was late. But to be fair, this was the first time I had been late. Everyone knows poor timekeeping can threaten your job security. I knew that in those early days Rick was watching me like a hawk, waiting for me to trip up, and hence prove I was incompetent for the job. When I arrived at work, I was panicking. I knew if I failed to put the horses out before Rick left for work, he would not be pleased with me, and my job could be hanging precariously from a fine string. When I arrived at work on the back of my bicycle, which I always left balancing against the far wall of the stable block, on this morning I found the horses had been removed from their stables, and were happily grazing hay that had been put out for them. I realized at once that the old man had covered for me. I had been late on the job, and he didn't want his son to find out about my late arrival. It was like he always had my back, and I felt indebted to him for his great kindness. I told him how grateful I was that he'd taken the horses out to graze and water, and had fed them on my behalf. "I don't know what to say, sir. I'm really grateful to you." The old man looked at me and chuckled.
"What are you talking about, Eric? When Rick left for work this morning, you had watered and fed the horses yourself. They had been taken out from the stable blocks, so of course you were not late. What are you talking about, son?"
So there we are. that's the end of part 3 of our story. Isn't it getting exciting? I love these stories. You're going to really enjoy part 4, so I look forward to you joining me tomorrow night. Until next time, goodbye. Good night.